right, everyone, welcome back from Super Wild Card Weekend. It is Off the Bench. Brandon Carney alongside Maddie Kroll. Maddie, what a start to the playoffs. You enjoy this weekend of games? I mean, I feel like for a wild card round, I mean, the games were pretty solid overall. I can't really complain. Last year, there was a bunch of blowouts. I went back and looked, but this was mostly competitive, even the games we didn't think should be.
Right. I think that the only game that wasn't really competitive was last night.
Right.
When we watched the Cowboys face the Bucs. Demolish the Bucs.
Yeah, that was a mess. We'll get to it later, but I'm just not surprised. It's one of those things where people's only reasoning for picking the Bucs really was playoff Brady, and it was like they're going to activate another level, and also the Cowboys' historic choking. And I get that part; that is valid. They're on the road in Tampa Bay, but ultimately, we knew that if both of these teams came out and played their best, which the Bucs didn't even do that. But if they come out and play their best, the Cowboys are the more talented team. I think we all knew that. They're one of the most talented teams in the league, and they proved it. That game is also why this podcast is one day late, if anybody's confused. Normally we say, okay, we can deal with recording before Monday Night Football. Monday Night Football playoff edition is a little bit different. So we're pushing it back by a day, and just to make sure we get the full scope of things. But we can run down all of these playoff games. We're going to run down all of them, give you our picks for next week, and then get on to some other topics too. But most of this podcast will be running down to the weekend that was for Super Wild Card Weekend. And what game could we possibly start with other than Jags Chargers? The game that I believed going in would be maybe the most fun game of the weekend. Two teams that are relatively well-liked. Two teams that, at different points in the season, we either weren't sure if they were going to make the playoffs or were downright positive they weren't going to make the playoffs, that being the Jags for a while. And then we get a crazy game, but not crazy in the way that I expected. Maddie, what was your reaction to this game as a whole?
I was on the edge of my seat, I felt like, the whole time. I left this game saying I made the right choice betting on Peterson, because that's really what the game came down to, is the coaching style. Brandon Staley, wow, this was a bad time for him to decide to start playing conservative. I don't know where that came from, but this was not the week.
No, it wasn't. And he's giving a bad name to Brandons everywhere. It's why, I'm getting closer and closer to the legal name change of just Bran and dropping the D-O-N. Yeah, it was a rough showing for Brandon Staley, which makes me even more surprised that the Chargers came out and basically said they're sticking with him. So they actually fired offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi and quarterbacks coach / passing game coordinator Shane Day. So those are the changes that they're making right now, and they're planning to keep Brandon Staley around, which did surprise me. Just go over the game itself real quick. So Trevor Lawrence, to start this game, 4 interceptions in the first half. It was a super rough go of it. The Jags ended up coming back from down 27-0. Now, these interceptions are what was interesting. Our producer was talking about this with me before we went live here, how none of them were really his fault. I wouldn't say none of them were his fault, but I will say the first interception was complete tough luck. It was a great play made by Joey Bosa to kind of disengage and tip the ball. And for that to happen on the second play of the game just felt like it really set the tone, and that Trevor and this Jags team that haven't been to the playoffs in a while, Trevor obviously having never been to the playoffs in the NFL, just rattled them completely. And then that broke off a string of, a bunch of interceptions that had different levels of it being his fault. I think the second one, a lot of contact, and then Asante Samuel just jumped in front. You could argue there should have been a penalty there. The third pick was pretty bad, kind of stared down Asante Samuel's side of the field. And then the fourth pick, not great. I mean, it was a tight coverage throw to Evan Engram. It was one of those that could go either way. It's just when you have already thrown 3 interceptions, maybe avoid the tight windows at that point. But overall, if you break down each of those interceptions, I don't think it was a major shock that if the Jags were able to calm themselves down, they could come back, right? It wasn't like they were getting severely outplayed. Trevor was he looked rattled. Mm-hmm.
And for good reason, right? That defense came out ready to play, shook them up. After that Zay Jones debacle, where everybody kind of felt like the officials weren't there for that part of the game, I felt like towards the end they kind of came back and tried to make up for it. And then you saw Joey Bosa and the Chargers defenders start to get really flustered. And honestly, I think that was a huge difference maker in the game. It's just the way that they responded to a little bit of adversity towards the end.
Yeah, and I mean, look, as much as I want to give props to the Jaguars and Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence for turning it around and keeping composed in the second half, you also have to look at a 27-point lead and think that, even if the Jags do those things, they shouldn't be able to win the game. Like, this was a massive collapse by the Chargers. The Chargers, all they needed to do was show some level of competence as a team, run the damn ball a little bit effectively in the second half. Maddie, I'm not sure, and I should have done my research on this, but I saw something say that they ran for -3 yards in the second half. Even if that's not true, it felt like it was true.
It felt like it too. I saw that too.
They were not running the ball at all. And I mean, for a team that had arguably the best running back in the league this year, at least in terms of, finding the end zone and especially in the pass game, Austin Eckler was nowhere to be found in that second half. And it was just a bad look. And on top of it, you imagine how differently things could have played out if one Mike Williams was available in this one. But thanks to some questionable decisions by Brandon Staley, who apparently has major job security for whatever reason, Mike Williams was not available in this one. And it just took away their biggest downfield threat by a mile, their biggest receiver in general by a mile. So it was just not a good look for the Chargers. Says more about, I won't say says more, says an equal amounts about the Jags and the Chargers as to how this played out. The Chargers charged it. They did it again.
They did it again. They each had a half.
Yeah, exactly. They each had a half. It's just the Jags ended up being better. The Chargers coming out with a fiery 3 points in that second half. One of the notable things to come out after the game. So, criticizing officials is something that we don't see too often blatantly, right? Because guys know they're going to get fined. They know if you even say something halfway negative about officials, you're going to get fined.
Right. Do it behind their back.
Joey Bosa apparently did not give a shit, because Joey Bosa after this game said, quote, I mean, if I say something to them, I get a $40,000 fine. But if they blow a call that ruins an entire team season, they'll probably be back in the locker room after the game like, ha, got that asshole. Oh, yeah, got him 15 yards. What a loser. I don't know if I agree with Joey that officials are doing that. It does feel like they get a little big for their britches sometimes, but as if the officials are having locker room talk like, man, screw that guy. Like, I don't know if I'll go that far, but it was a little refreshing to hear a player come out and say what we're all thinking sometimes, which is that officials, they're not held accountable. I will say that.
Right. I do think that you have to be able to draw a line and protect the officials. I understand the league's reasoning on that. I do think that it's a little bit ridiculous that they're not able to express their interpretation of how the game was handled. I think that that's slightly, I don't think that it's fair in that aspect. I do think that everybody knew that he was obviously upset. When you throw your helmet and you say F that when somebody's trying to calm you down and everything else, so we watched him kind of throw his little tantrum, your fine's coming to you. So you might as well just take it and move on. I think that emotions were high after that. But no, I think all throughout the weekend, that set the tone as far as how the officials were calling games after that. So what he said must have sparked up some ears. I don't think that the officials are sitting there just like hashing it out and having a shit fest on each player. But I do think that, they're human, right? They make mistakes, but more oftentimes than not, they're correct.
Yeah, and I do want to say, too, it seems like some people are taking Bosa's comments a little out of context, too, because they're like, well, why are you complaining about the officiating? You blew the game. He said that like right after this statement. He was like, we blew the game. It was pretty obvious. But it is possible to be both, upset about the officiating and acknowledge that that's not directly what cost you the game. He's just pissed off about both, and understandably so. So that's – right. It's absolutely fair. So that is Jags Chargers. Unfortunately, that puts a bit of a hole in my bracket, which otherwise I went 5 for 6 on the weekend, which I'm thrilled about. But I did have the Chargers winning 2 games. So that's not going to happen. I'll probably just end up replacing them with the Jags as far as my bracket goes. I don't know why I'm hating on the Chiefs so much. I really don't. It just feels like that's the team that's going to get upset. Maybe it's because the Titans as the 1 seed got upset last year, and my brain's like, hey, that can happen. I don't know what it is, but I really would love to see Trevor just go into Arrowhead and take down the Chiefs. That would be wonderful.
I think it's just everybody's sick of the Chiefs at this point. A lot of us are. We're egging on other teams at this point.
Well, you look at it, you look around the playoff teams, right? You have a bunch of teams who, some of them have been good for a few years and some of them are just kind of coming on now. The thing separating the Chiefs and the other teams that have been good for years is that they have a Super Bowl. Like the Eagles, this iteration of the Eagles does not have a Super Bowl. The Bills don't have one. The Bengals don't have one. The Niners don't have, the Chiefs are the only one. So it's like, we'll just take someone different. Thanks.
Yeah.
Speaking of the 49ers, the other game that happened on Saturday, the 49ers defeat the Seahawks 41-23. Now, this one, the first half of this game was interesting because to me, it felt like, the Niners were kind of doing whatever they wanted on offense in the first half, but the Seahawks were doing just enough to stop them, which led to a Seahawks lead 17-16 after the first half. Then in the second half, it just goes to show you that the larger sample size you get, meaning, the more minutes of the game played, the top dog just does start to emerge. And that was what happened with the 49ers. So the 49ers in the second half, they come out, they score on their first possession. Then the Seahawks put together a decent drive, strip sacked in the red zone. 49ers score a touchdown, Seahawks punt, they're down 2 scores, and then Debo goes 74 yards to the house. It just felt like it kept compounding as the game went on. But Maddie, what were your takeaways from this game? And I mean, man, how impressive is Brock Purdy?
That was my biggest takeaway from this game. I was so impressed because honestly, I expected him to come in and have that rookie moment, which he had a couple of questionable decisions here and there, but it was nothing that I would look at it and say like that's a true rookie out there playing. I felt like he had a lot of help from obviously his coaches and his teammates, but I was so impressed with Brock Purdy coming out of this, so much so that I was worried for Trey Lance at the end. I was like, man, I mean, you come in as a rookie halfway through the season and now you are leading your team to the second round of the playoffs. That's a lot as a rookie taking it.
The longer this goes, it just feels like it's going to be Brock Purdy's team. I mean, the way that the 49ers have gelled with him, have rallied around him, it just says a lot to me. And it feels insane to say that, a 7th-round rookie quarterback is going to go into next year with this being his job. But I do feel like that's what's going to happen as of right now. Like, even if originally I said they have to make the Super Bowl, possibly win the Super Bowl for him to really lock down this job. I don't know that I feel that way anymore with how well he's playing. The question is, and we're going to bring this up probably a few more times before we get an answer, is what do they do with Trey Lance? I have no idea, because this is a guy you traded so much capital for, and yet can you keep him around as your backup? Like, you do need some level of quarterback depth, right? Jimmy's going to be gone, and Trey, at the very least, might be a nice backup to have around, but can you do that for a guy you spent so much on? Should you go and try and get a return for him? If you do, what is that trade value? It's like a weirder version of the Jordan Love situation, where it's like, if you're trying to trade him, you don't know what you can get because we haven't seen him, except Trey Lance has had infinitely more stock put into him already, just in terms of draft picks, that it's like, I don't know if they're going to want to, take the sunk cost of whatever it is and take maybe 1 first-round pick back for him if they can get that, or what his value is right now. But the Niners quarterback situation, the fact that, a team still in the playoffs has probably the most fascinating quarterback situation right now heading into next year is super unique and super interesting. I don't know what to expect.
I don't know what to expect either. We know that Jimmy G is probably gone, but it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun to see what the 49ers decide to do, but I really think that this is Brock's team.
Yeah.
I mean, I went back and I watched, I think that there was only one game that I had film on that Trey Lance was in, and I know that that's not a huge sample size. That's why I don't want to go off and get into a lot of detail on it. But as far as timing and rhythmic goes, I mean, Brock Purdy is there. He's on it. I just kind of feel like Trey Lance almost second guesses himself, or the speed of the game takes over and he goes through his progressions too quickly and misses things. Brock Purdy doesn't. Brock Purdy's on and he makes his decision quickly and accurately, and that's hard to come by in a rookie quarterback. So if they can develop that, I think Brock's their guy.
Yeah, and I mean, I've said it before, I'll say it again, that, Brock feels like Kyle Shanahan's get out of jail free card as far as the Jimmy situation was concerned, because there's a whole argument over, did Shanahan actually want Trey, or did he want Mac Jones, who kind of fits this mold more? It feels like right now, and this is probably a little early to make this evaluation, but Brock Purdy is Jimmy plus. And I mean, the fact that Kyle was able to stumble upon a player like that is just ridiculous luck on his part. I think everybody was kind of salivating at the idea of, okay, if Kyle Shanahan can do what he's done with, a game manager, pocket passer, quarterback, what can he do with a guy that has that extra level, extra dynamic, piece to him that Trey Lance does? We may not ever find out. And so I just hope that Trey Lance goes to a team, if he gets traded, goes to a team that has, a similarly creative offensive coordinator or head coach, somebody that can take advantage of this. It is hard to come by. I mean, there's not many, but just somebody that's even half of what Shanahan is creativity-wise, because otherwise if Trey Lance goes to a team that's just going to try and, turn him into or not play to his strengths, much like what the Bears did with Justin Fields for a long time, it's not going to be pretty. I think Shanahan was the perfect guy to coach Trey Lance, but he may not need to anymore, and it may not be in the best interest of the team.
Right.
Quarterback situation-wise, let's look on the other side of the field. So Geno Smith puts to rest a incredible season. This is the end of his season, but one of the best seasons I've seen. Should be in contention for comeback player of the year. I don't know that he'll get it, but Geno, 30 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. I can't say enough about the guy, how good he looked this year. My concern, though, and I'm leaning toward no, but Maddie, do you think there's any risk of Geno having been sort of a one-hit wonder quarterback? Do you see there being risk of the Seahawks building around him for the next couple years?
When we're talking about short term, the next couple of years, I don't think that there's a huge risk. I think that it would be a smarter decision to take the capital that they're going to have and build the team around him and then try to find a quarterback who can step in and fit that mold. Because you're not building around like a Lamar Jackson where you're having to completely reinvent the playbook, right? Somebody else could step in and take over that offense. Why not leave it at least for another year? See what Geno has, because he's proved himself this year, I believe, in my opinion. And I know that there's going to be a lot of quarterback movement in this offseason, which is going to mix things up. But I think if I'm the Seahawks, I'm sticking with Geno and at least giving it a 2-year run.
Yeah, I agree. I think Geno's the guy for the next couple of years at least. The question that we broached last week was about just, the Seahawks' position in the draft this year, right? And all the picks that they have from their trade with the Broncos. This is probably the one year that they're so uniquely positioned to move up and get a quarterback if they want, be it Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, probably Stroud, who did declare for the draft, thankfully. Yeah, the Seahawks, though, I wouldn't blame them if they do that, but I'm not worried about Geno anymore. I was worried about him I don't know why. My instinct was, could this be a one-year wonder? And then I kind of did some research on the one-year wonder quarterbacks and realized that none of them had seasons this prolific. The best comp I could find was Matt Castle in, I believe it was 2010, had 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Rest of his career, both before and after, was pretty bad, other than the year he filled in on the Patriots, but the stats weren't great that year. He fell off after his career year. But then you look a little deeper, completion percentage for Castle, 58%. Completion percentage for Geno, 68%. It's a little higher. Nobody's ever reached 30 touchdowns and then had it be a one and done. So I'm not worried. I think Geno is a great story and one that can continue for, really as long as he can avoid injuries, because he's 32. The age is going to catch up with him eventually. But the Seahawks, I don't think there's much risk in building around him for the next few years. And another team that lucked into a quarterback, another team in the NFC West that lucked into a quarterback when they did not think they were going to have one. Just what a season for the Seahawks. Really can't say enough about it. And Geno making Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf more consistently productive than Russ ever did for those fantasy players out there.
Geno Smith is like the fantasy football savior, I feel like, this year, because a lot of people who were like, damn, I ended up with, Lockett was the big one. I feel like everybody was like, damn, I had to take Lockett. And then we're pleasantly surprised. But we've seen how quarterbacks can thrive when they're in an environment that is encouraging. And it's just, once you have a good fit, you see progress happen. And I think we saw that a lot with Trevor Lawrence. Just in 1 year, we've seen him completely turn around. Now his team's in the playoffs. I think Geno has a good spot there, and I think that they build around him, at least for the next couple of years. We're on the same team on that.
Yeah, I think this team's super exciting. And with all the draft picks that they do have, just go in and build a juggernaut around Geno if you can and see where it takes you. This team can compete for a division title. They were up until like a month or so ago when they had kind of a rough patch. But, that you add an infusion of youth or just even veteran talent, however you can get it, who knows what this team can accomplish. I really think the sky is the limit for this iteration of the Seahawks, for as long as they can have Geno under center. We'll worry about the quarterback of the future a little later on. A game that I'm so excited to talk about. And it's just so vindicating because this team gaslit me for an entire season. The Minnesota Vikings are, in fact, frauds. And
Minnesota Vikings.
It's so nice to be able to say that definitively. The Vikings at home against the New York Giants fell 31-24. The Vikings are who we thought they were, and the Giants, thankfully, did not let them off the hook. Maddie, what were your main takeaways from this game? And Kirk did not like that at all. What were your main takeaways from this game, and what do you think was the difference?
I think that the Giants defense won this game is what it came down to. I think that this highlighted all of Kirk's weaknesses. And to me, I'll be interested to see if he's really their guy going forward or if they don't try to take a stab at another quarterback. I mean, you have Jefferson, who I just kind of feel like you get a quarterback who can connect well with him, and it's not going to take a whole lot to be better than Kirk. There just is no nice way to say that. I feel like Kirk might be towards the end of his starting quarterback privileges.
Yeah, and I gotta give a shout out to SB Nation because I came across this article. I think it was through Reddit that they compared Kirk to a Costco hot dog, and they said that Kirk is a perfect facsimile of quality quarterback, but he's not actually a quality quarterback. And I was like, man,
they said that, not us.
I can't disagree with that. So, Costco hot dog, Kirk Cousins, I really do like that comparison. Yeah. I did. So I came on the podcast last week and mentioned how, the Giants, I believe I said they were undefeated in games where Danny Dimes rushed at least 10 times. What do the Giants do? I hope they're listeners to the Off the Bench podcast because Danny Dimes ran the ball 17 times. That's insane, even for him. And I'm glad that's what they're doing with him because that is his strength and that's what sets him apart. It's the weirdest thing because he doesn't look like he should be able to do that. I feel like everybody just still has it glued in their head when he tripped over his own feet a few years ago, running for like a 70-yard touchdown. But remember, he got those, 50 or so yards before he got tripped up. Like, this dude can run.
And the turf monster's hit before.
The turf monster hits occasionally. So, yeah, Daniel Jones played amazing. But, yeah, Kirk – oh, boy, let me look up Kirk Cousins' contract really quick because I'm pretty sure this is just it's not good for the Vikings.
While you're doing that, Daniel Jones, what impressed me was each carry he had, I don't know if you noticed this, he was more confident the next play, the next carry. It was almost like that, giving him the ball and allowing him to make those short yard runs, it gave him a burst of energy and confidence. Also, that one-handed catch by Saquon was just unbelievable. I was at the edge of my seat. I actually rewound that and watched it again.
No, the Giants played so well. And I mean, you look at how Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley were used, and it is no surprise to anybody that Mike Kafka is being a sought after guy for other coordinator jobs or head coaching jobs around the league. It's just not a surprise at all. So Kirk Cousins contract, the Vikings actually aren't as screwed as I thought they were, but they're going to have to ride with Kirk at least into next year, which I don't think is much of a surprise to anybody as bad as this performance was. Kirk Cousins' dead cap hit, if they were to get rid of him right now, $48 million. They're not doing that. The year after, though, 12 and a half. I mean, you can stomach that if you really want to move on. But I do think that the Kirk era in Minnesota, barring a playoff run next year, is coming to an end because this is a guy that just has not gotten it done. He is, I want to say, a B-plus type of guy. Like, regular season, he can do it for you. He can get you some numbers, but he's also going to have his fair share of just bonehead plays. And he doesn't – it's crazy. Watching him play alongside Daniel Jones or on the opposite side of Daniel Jones, you look and you're like, Daniel Jones at least has that one elite trait that he is super mobile. Mm-hmm. Kirk doesn't have that. Kirk just has games where he's, he'll be super accurate for stretches and he'll hit a few deep passes to Justin Jefferson, but otherwise he is so prone to just falling off and being useless at the worst possible time that I don't know how you confidently go forward with him beyond next year.
I agree. I think what you're describing is the fact that he is not a second reaction quarterback. If his design throws are not there, he will throw an interception or not know what the hell to do. And there's no in between. He's either okay in game managing or it's really, really bad.
Yeah. So Kirk, Vikings, I don't know what to tell you guys. I mean, I think we kind of knew this was coming all year. I don't know that necessarily I fully believed it would happen in the first round, but I did pick it in my bracket just because, I mean, I slandered you guys all year, so I kind of had to go with it. And it turned out to be right. So, look, let this be a lesson going forward that the eye test does still matter. And I know people aren't going to like that because it just gives you the ammo to discredit any team with a good record. You can be like, well, just look at them. They don't look good. There is merit to the eye test, and the Vikings did not pass it. I mean, look, you're the only 13-win team in NFL history with a negative point differential. How can you be surprised You got burned in a one-score game, the thing that you are notoriously undefeated at, 11-0 throughout the season in one-score games. Yeah, eventually you're going to get burned because as much as you want to say being 11-0 in one-score games means you're clutch and you can hold on and you can come back, whatever it is, there's a level of luck involved there too, if you want to admit it or not. When you keep things one score for that long, you are inviting chaos. There's things that can happen out of your control, bad penalties, missed calls, whatever they are. Being 11-0 in one-score games is, I would say, like 50% a testament to your talent and skill to pull those games out, and 50% they just bounced your way. And the Vikings showed that. Losing a one-score game immediately in the playoffs just tells me everything I need to know about them. So RIP Vikings, figure something out. Maddie, let me ask you this. For as long as they do have Kirk, which may only be next year, do you see what do they have to do to get over the hump? Can they with Kirk? Is there any part of the ball, any part of the team that they can improve to get over the hump?
Well, they were injured on the offensive line towards the end of the stretch, which you really saw. Kirk has to have a good offensive line. If you are going to depend on timing throws that are the decision's been made before the ball snapped where the ball's going, you have to have pass pro. But if you're going to drop your quarterback back that many times, then you need to have an offensive line that can keep up. And what we saw is towards the end when that started to wiggle and sway, Kirk couldn't handle it. He just couldn't get into a rhythm. And so I think that you start there and make sure that everybody's healthy, ready to go, or at least that you're a little bit deep. And then I also think if they could get another receiver who could go deep and get a little bit of heat off Jefferson, I think that's going to make a world of difference. I mean, I know that they have Hawkinson who kind of plays the middle, but if you have one more guy, you're going to have a situation like the Bengals have where it's like, pick your poison. Who are you going to cover? Because I do feel like the defense holds up on their own. You know what I mean? There's sometimes they went to sleep, but for the most part, that's pretty built. If I were picking somebody, I would make sure that I had a strong receiver. I mean, an elite receiver that could help take some heat off Jefferson and then focus some effort on the offensive line.
I will say, what a trade for TJ Hawkinson, though, because at the very least they had him because he was an amazing compliment to Justin Jefferson. I totally get what you're saying. Have another guy that can stretch the field and be on the outside. But Hawkinson, at the very least, gave them another weapon for defenses to worry about because without him, I don't think they'd have one. Like, Irv Smith caught a nice little touchdown, in the back of the end zone, but he's not a guy that's been consistently productive at all throughout his career. Adam Thielen has lost a step and a half. KJ Osborne I do like, but yeah, Hawkinson, amazing trade. Now just go get yourselves another outside guy and see what this offense can look like.
And then maybe you can use Hawkinson to block some because he threw out a couple of good blocks this past game. The only thing I was so mad whenever he chose to throw Hawkinson that ball whenever he was, 3 yards short of a first down or 2 yards, whatever that was. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Look somewhere else.
I think that was kind of what turned people on Kirk officially was it. Because Kirk played a good game in this one. Overall, he played a fairly good game. But that game
one mistake
on the line, and you're throwing it 4 yards short of the sticks. I don't care if that's what the play call was. That can't be the main target that the play called for. You can't throw that pass. Throw it literally anywhere else. You gave the game away. TJ Hawkinson, he's covered. He's not breaking that off. I'm sorry. So that's the end. That summarizes Kirk, and it might be the end of him after next year. So we will see. Another cold weather location for a game. We got the Buffalo Bills versus the Miami Dolphins. This is the peak of games that were close that we didn't think should be. The Bills pull out this one by 3 points. Maddie, what do you think I know what kept the Dolphins in this. It was largely the turnovers by the Bills. Mm-hmm. Are you worried about Josh Allen and kind of this reckless play that we saw, for a while during the season, then it kind of cooled down at the end, and now is it back?
I do think that we should be worried because Josh Allen, and maybe it turns into a situation like how we saw Dak play a terrible game and he came back this week and went balls to the wall. I hope that happens. I hope this was a wake-up call for him. But he made bad decisions. Of course, we had the 2 interceptions. My issue with Josh Allen is he is leaving the pocket way too early, like a very clear defined pocket where he has protection and it's like his brain's moving too fast. His body can't keep up. And it's just like he's scrambling when he doesn't have to. He needs to relax and play the game strategically and see what's available. He's not making reads. He's just going off and trying to play hero ball. I think that we should be worried because we know the game will not be won if Josh Allen doesn't come out and ball out. And you're facing the Bengals, who have a great I mean, a great defense who's going to challenge them. I'm worried, but how do you feel about it? How do you feel about Josh Allen? Because I've been back and forth. I think he's an elite quarterback. I do want to say that because I know people are going to come at me for that. I think that he had a really bad game, in my opinion.
So here's what I'll say about Josh Allen. I think your evaluation of him, maybe leaving the pocket too early is valid. What I will look at as far as the interceptions are concerned, one of them was a throw to John Brown where he broke off his route early for no particular reason. He had a streak where when Josh Allen released the ball, the way John Brown is running, he was going to be by his defender by the time the ball got to him. He broke off for no reason, and it got picked on what was also a solid play. Then the other interception was to Cole Beasley where the defender got his arm in front of it. Cole Beasley, first of all, needs to come back to the ball a little bit better. But here's my takeaway. Stop throwing to these receivers you got off the street a month ago.
Yes.
That's my issue. Like, you have Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, Dawson Knox. Why? Why did you bring these guys in, and why are you throwing to them so consistently? Like, I'm not surprised things are going wrong when you're throwing to players who haven't been in your system for more than a month. Like, well, Cole Beasley used to be here, so maybe that's not fair to him, but like he's barely played football this year. Like, I don't understand that. That's why I'm more concerned about the team, because those guys aren't going anywhere. John Brown and Cole Beasley aren't going anywhere. I'm more concerned about the team and possibly the construction of the team that's going to lead to more of these turnovers, more so than I am about Josh Allen's decision-making being what leads to it. Either way, it's bad. The fumble, like, that's going to happen. Josh was being ripped down. Like, I don't blame him too much for that. But, like, the interceptions, it feels like a personnel issue to me. And those personnel issues could continue. Look, Gabe Davis had a really nice game. Stephon Diggs had a really nice game. Dawson Knox caught a really nice touchdown. Just work through those guys. I know you need to have tertiary targets and a fourth target and a fifth target to at least be on the field and, target them a couple times. But overall, stay away from these dudes, especially on, like, it feels silly to say stay away from John Brown on the deep shots, and that's probably all he's on the team to do. But I don't know. Coach the guy up. Tell him something, because
you got to have that chemistry too.
Yeah, these dudes off the street being the ones that are turning the game, like, that's a problem. This is not the team from this whole season that's messing things up. It's these random newbies. So I don't get it. I'm not super worried about Josh. I think he will bounce back this week, and I do think the Bills will come out on top. But it's concerning. Like, you don't want to see these turnovers, whatever the cause may be.
I agree.
As far as the Dolphins go, though, let's talk about Skylar Thompson. I didn't think he was too bad. The box score says he was bad, but I didn't think he was too bad.
I didn't think he was too bad, but I attribute that mostly to Mike McDaniel.
That's fair.
I'm going to come out and say that. I think that what we saw was really good coaching, and they put him in the best possible position. I also feel like the Bills struggled to really get home and put the pressure there, which is going to be a problem if they end up having to face the Chiefs later on. But I felt like Skylar Thompson exceeded my expectations.
Yeah. Look, for another seventh round quarterback coming into a playoff game that he did not expect to be in, he played very well. Like, he completely overmatched, shouldn't have to be in this situation, and yet he played pretty solid. If it weren't for Jalen Waddle missing some pretty bad plays, I don't know if you can attribute it all to the shoulder injury he suffered in the first quarter. Maybe you can. Either way, he was dropping a lot of passes and not helping his quarterback out. And the other issue that I had with this was toward the end of the game, the clock management, which I do not think was on Skylar Thompson. Like, Mike McDaniel's got to get those plays to him sooner or more efficiently or something. Like, understand you're working with your third string quarterback who is a seventh rounder. Like, you got to just help him a little bit more, because those constant delay of games coming out of the huddle with 5 seconds left on the play clock, you can't have that, especially over and over and over again. Like, you got to just know what you're working with. But overall, I mean, a great fight by this Dolphins team. You lose by 3 points. I feel like you're feeling pretty good going into next year. It looks like Tua is going to be the guy next year again as of right now. So Dolphins, without Tua, this was probably your ceiling anyway, getting to the playoffs. Like, at least you got there. You got the rest of the team, some more playoff experience. But, yeah, quite a fight. Skylar, I don't know if we'll see you again, but – there's something to work off of here. It was solid at the very least. One more note, just real quick. I'm not drafting Gabe Davis in fantasy. Stop putting up numbers and trying to make me draft you in fantasy. I'm not having it. You did this last year. I had it in my head, your stupid 4-touchdown game in the playoffs, and now immediately when we hit the playoffs, you have one of your best games of the year. Gabe, I'm not doing it. It's not happening. It's so enticing to draft the guy that should be the number 2 target on one of the best offenses in football, who plays 95+% of the snaps, and yet you tortured me all year. You are the receiver version of Kyle Pitts. So, no, not falling for it. None of you should fall for it either. You could pick him in like the 10th round if you want, but before that, no, absolutely not.
One of my favorite interactions on fantasy Twitter this weekend was everybody when Khalil Shakur caught that massive pass. Everybody was like, yeah, let's go. And I saw so many people on fantasy Twitter talking about, oh, sleeper pick for next year, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I know for a fact about 12 of you were so pissed. What was it, like 6 weeks ago when he had like drop after drop? I was like, don't even talk to me right now. Don't even talk to me. It was one of the funniest things. I mean, just capital letters. You saw his name over and over and over again. I was like, you guys have short-term memory loss. No, he's going to be a good receiver, but he's got a ways to go.
As of right now, when it comes to receiving options in Buffalo, you're drafting Stephon Diggs and you're drafting no one else. Or, sorry, not drafting, but confidently drafting and starting no one else but Stephon Diggs. I don't want to hear any more about Gabe Davis, Khalil Shakir, Isaiah McKenzie, Jamison Crowder's corpse, Cole Beasley, John Brown. I don't want any of them. It's Diggs and Diggs alone. Not even Dawson Knox. He wasn't even good this year, but he had a good playoff game. So,
had a couple touchdowns.
Sorry for the fantasy sidebar, but God, the Bills were a frustrating team for fantasy, weren't they? There's such a good offense that somehow only produced 2 consistently good fantasy players, the quarterback and the top receiver.
Yep.
I don't get it, but that is what it is. Moving on, we've got Bengals versus Ravens. So this one, another one super close that we didn't expect it to be. The Bengals pulled this one out by 7 points. Maddie, how did you feel about this game? And I mean, why was this game so close?
I was shocked. I was like, wow, the Ravens are really trying to hang around here. I think the Ravens you pointed this out last week. They're just one of those teams that you can never fully count out just because they're the type of team they're resourceful. They're going to rise to the occasion. I think that the O-line for the Bengals is going to be a huge concern moving forward, but we saw, wow, can I speak correctly? We've seen Burrow just come out and act like that's not even an issue. I'm interested to see how the Bills are going to handle the Bengals in the offensive line. Are they going to be able to get home? Are they going to be able to create enough pressure, as well as staying deep? You can't play soft on them at all. So I was impressed with the Bengals, so as far as coming back from that mid-game.
Yeah, you would think they'll be able to get home. So the Bengals are missing. They've been missing Lyle Collins with a torn ACL, MCL. Lost Alex Kappa a couple weeks ago to an ankle injury. Now Jonah Williams goes down with a dislocated kneecap. Not sure if he's going to be available or if he is, what percentage he will be at. This O-line is crumbling at the wrong time. We said literally that exact sentence last week, and that was before the latest injury to Jonah Williams. So it's not a good time for your O-line to be falling apart. But the Bengals still came out with the win. It's definitely going to be tough against Buffalo. I feel like this game, so J.K. Dobbins after the game said, I want the ball in that situation where we're trying to run it in from the 1 or the 2 or whatever it was. He also said that they would have won if they had Lamar Jackson. Initially, I was like, that feels very sour grapes to me, and I don't know if it's true. Then I realized Tyler Huntley, on the play in which Sam Hubbard, ended up with the ball and returned it for 98 yards and a touchdown. Tyler Huntley just kind of audibled himself to go over the top of the pile when that was not the play design. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you probably do win the game if it's Lamar Jackson. At the very least, it's close because in that situation, Lamar's not going to do something stupid like that. Like that was a really bad play by Tyler Huntley. You look at how the defense was lined up. I think it was Chris Collinsworth on the call described it perfectly. How, you have these 2 backs behind you ready to push you. Why are you putting them there if your plan is to jump over the line? Because all you're doing is clogging the middle with more linebackers and not, putting yourself in a position to go low and get pushed into the end zone. Instead, you're just reaching the ball into more people than is necessary. So Lamar
defense. Yeah.
Right. Lamar wouldn't make that play. J.K. Dobbins, at least if you give it a straight up rushing attempt, it's probably not going to be a turnover. So I don't totally disagree with Dobbins there. But yeah, I think if they have Lamar Jackson, this is an interesting game, but I think we knew that, right? The Ravens with Lamar Jackson are as competitive of a team as the Bengals are, just in different ways. They're built so differently. And it would have been an exciting game. Yeah, completely different weapon. But this does bring me to a question that I'm starting to not know the answer to. Maddie, do you think Lamar Jackson's a Raven next year? Because I'm starting to kind of go the other way, and I'm not sure anymore.
I will say I have heard from people who are not in media but are very close contacts that are reliable sources. There's a lot of talk going around the Baltimore area that Lamar did not come back solely because he wants to use this as contract leverage. Whether that happened or not, I'm not sure. But from their discussions, my understanding of it is that Lamar wants to get paid for what he's worth, right? We saw everything that happened with Deshaun. I personally feel like a lot of people feel like the Browns' decision to pay Deshaun what they paid him with a guaranteed contract was an irresponsible decision for their franchise. It just is. Financially, it is. It's good for the player, irresponsible for the franchise. The Ravens have built their entire offense around Lamar, and they've said over and over again, we want to make this work. We want to make this work. When you have a player who's negotiating for himself, I don't know that he's going to compromise. I think that he loves Baltimore. He obviously wants to be there. I think that the Ravens are going to do everything that they can to keep him. But who's to say if somebody comes out and offers Lamar the world, maybe he goes. I don't know. I don't see him leaving, but they're going to have to pay him, and you're going to have to pay him now with the guaranteed money.
The Ravens have come out and said that they plan to tag Lamar. So if they can't reach a deal, so it could be a tag and trade situation. Yeah. So Lamar posted this thing on Instagram, and you don't want to take social media too far, but it was basically a long screenshot of not a poem, but like a quote about valuing what you have. And if you value what you have, it will, provide back to you. Essentially insinuating that the Ravens haven't valued him to this point, and he feels that. And I think that's obvious.
I agree.
The fact that before the season tells me that. So, look, as of right now, I'm starting to feel like Lamar won't be a Raven. And also, as of right now, this brings up another hilarious connection that I didn't think of before. Maybe the Ravens go out and get Trey Lance. Guy that fits your system already, just isn't as seasoned. You don't have to change your entire offense. He's a runner. Maybe that's the fit. I don't know. But either way, Lamar Jackson looking less and less likely to be a Raven. I still don't think it's under 50%, but we're getting there. I'm not guaranteeing.
This is where, at this point, I'm just like, I understand that Lamar wants to do it himself. I get that. However, there's certain things that just to make things go smoothly, to make it easier on yourself, get an agent, because maybe it's something that you don't get the guaranteed money, but you go in like Debo's agent said, okay, but if you're going to use me as a running back when I'm a quarterback, then I want incentives. Maybe that takes care of some of that fear that you have as far as getting your bag. I just kind of feel like Lamar's kind of set himself up into a tricky situation the way he wants to handle this. But I feel like the Ravens need to do everything they can to keep him. You've built your entire offense around him. You went out and we watched what they've done with Likely. They've literally set it up. Okay, Mark Andrews is your leading receiver 2 years in a row as a tight end. And then you bring in Likely, who's putting up unreal numbers. And I know that Bateman got hurt and that adds into it and everything else. But, they haven't stretched the field. So I feel like Roman's job has to be on the line, right? In my eyes, I know that Harbaugh's come out and said, we're sticking with Greg, whatever. At this point now, he's not done what he said that he was going to do last season, where he said he was going to stretch the ball down the field. He hasn't done that. And now you've pissed off your quarterback who you've built an offensive around. So I think that they get rid of Roman and they try to give Lamar the bag. But on the other side of that, if you pay Lamar, you don't really have a whole lot of money to go out and get new receivers that you desperately need.
Yeah, and I do think that's part of Lamar's frustration too, right? Is that he's been here for years now, and they haven't gotten him receivers other than Hollywood Brown, who was solid in his own right, but also was plagued with drops, and I don't think is a true number one wide receiver.
And he wasn't a good fit for that offense. He just wasn't. Right. He needs space to be able to be productive, and he wasn't going to get that in Baltimore.
Exactly, and now you've got Lamar, who's in a contract year, trying to get those numbers to, help his negotiation, and you're giving him receivers, Demarcus Robinson, James Prochet. You're signing Deshaun Jackson and Sammy Watkins off the street as if that That's literally worse than doing nothing.
Nothing.
Signing those guys is worse than just standing pat and bringing up somebody from the practice squad, whoever the hell it is. So
every Ravens fan's like, amen.
it was just handled pretty poorly by the Ravens, but I agree with you. They need to do everything they can to keep Lamar around, because otherwise they're facing a very unique and difficult rebuild, because you either have to, go get a Trey Lance or somebody else that fits the system, or you have to not only create a new system, but find the guys that are going to fit that. Like, find the quarterback. You're going to have to get real receivers if you're not going to run through the run game with the quarterback and the running backs like you have been for years now. So it's definitely an interesting offseason for Baltimore, for sure.
One more thing. I know that it has to be incredibly frustrating to be Lamar, and you're sitting back and the Bears, who have just had a shit couple seasons, turn around and say, listen, like, we have mimicked our offense to do what the Ravens did around Lamar Jackson, and to see success when they had all the odds stacked against them. When you have a franchise who's coming out and saying they're doing this for their quarterback, and you're sitting there thinking, wow, I wish my team would do that when you're the example, that's frustrating. I do want to know, where do you think, if Lamar was to be traded, where do you think is a good fit for him outside of Baltimore?
Boy, a big one that I have seen and that I do like, and it brings me right back to Kyle Pitts, is Atlanta. Atlanta needs a quarterback, and Atlanta is a team, they were competing for their division down the stretch. That was by virtue of their division being terrible, but they were still competing for the division. They have some decent weapons now, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Tyler Allgeier's looking good. It's a team that's on the come up. I think they will get more weapons, and getting Lamar over there, I don't think Desmond Ritter's the answer. Maybe he is. I don't know. But we know Marcus Mariota's not, and probably won't be back next year, at least not as a starter. So I would love to see Lamar in Atlanta. And if not, stick with the NFC South. The Panthers are interesting too. They're desperate for a quarterback and not in position to draft one. So those two teams are the big ones. I would love to see, and this is a pipe dream, but based on the teams that he's been interviewing with, I would love to see a Payton Lamar combination. I don't know how that would go, because Payton's never had a player like Lamar. Obviously, he had Drew Brees, but I just think that would be super interesting. And man, the content out of that is just.
And he's been saying he wants to work with an elite quarterback. So
there you go, right? Like, that's got to be. So that's been the interesting thing to me about Carolina. As far as all the teams that have been asking for interviews with Sean Payton, that's the only one that doesn't have a quarterback or have one coming in. Like, the Texans are going to be able to draft either Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. So, like, you have him coming in with a possibly great young quarterback and at least somebody he can work with. The other teams all have quarterbacks. Kyler Murray on the Cardinals, whatever's left of Russell Wilson. I still think he can maybe be okay on the Broncos, but the Panthers are the one team that it's like, you're not getting Sean Payton to come there if he really does care about the quarterback thing by enticing him with Sam Darnold. You're not. So,
not happening.
Look, Lamar, Payton, Carolina, make it happen. I think that'd be super interesting. The final playoff game, the one we opened with a little bit, Cowboys, Bucs. So the Cowboys take down the Bucs 31-14, a game that, again, the Cowboys, we knew if they were going to play at their best, they are the better team, and they played at their best on both sides of the ball. Dak Prescott chose a hell of a time to have literally his best game of the season, didn't he?
He needed that. He really needed that, especially coming off of what happened the week before.
Yeah, so Dak looked awesome, led that offense just up and down the field repeatedly. Meanwhile, Brady not looking as good. So I'll start with the elephant in the room. Is Brady done? Do you think Brady's done, or do you think he's going somewhere else? Or is he staying in Tampa?
I'm trying not to read too much into it. I feel like Brady is very transparent with his thoughts and where he's at. I think that I don't think this is how he wants to go out. I really don't. And I'm basing that off of what he said, based off of what Aaron Rodgers said after his post game. Granted, they made it to the playoffs, but you don't want to go out like that. And a lot of that wasn't his fault. How many drops did we watch happen? Big drops. He can still make those tight throws. His offensive line wasn't in sync. We did get Jensen back, but he wasn't 100%. And I think that if he comes back, as much as he has respect for that Bucs organization, I don't know that he's coming back to the Bucs. I really don't. He's a free agent. What is it, March or May? March, I think, right?
He's a free agent.
Free agent in one of the end months, either March or May. I just can't remember which one. I think that if he comes back, I don't think it will be with the Bucs. To be honest with you, I think that he might this offseason give it a little run with the whole what's it like in this broadcasting world, see if that's
Mhm.
what's going on. But I think that he still has the will to play, obviously. We'll see what his body tells him to do, and I think that's going to be the deciding factor. But my answer is I don't know. I don't think he knows truly.
Yeah, I thought it was telling. And look, maybe the cameras didn't pick up enough of this, but when Brady teams are down, you get that fired up Tom Brady, right? Like this crazy, oh God, he's about to do it, isn't he, Tom Brady? And we didn't get that. And my thinking for why that is every other time that Tom Brady's faced a comeback situation, obviously the Falcons game in the Super Bowl being the one everybody points to, is because Brady has a team that he knows should win the game or can win the game. I think after this season and all the trials and tribulations they went through, back of his mind, he knows this team isn't necessarily supposed to go far this year. Like, it's kind of hard to think they are when you go into the playoffs with a losing record. Like, that's going to be in the back of your mind that this team's not very good. I think he knows that. So maybe that's why we didn't see an overly emotional Tom Brady. I don't think he's made up his mind yet. Here's my concern about Tom, because I've seen everybody say what you're saying too about he doesn't want to go out that way. I'm going to compare this to something that maybe only wrestling fans will understand, but I'll try and break it down. The Undertaker. The Undertaker wrestled until he was in like his 60s. He only just recently had his last match. The Undertaker, against his own well-being, over and over and over again, kept just saying, I can't go out like that. He would have these terrible matches, not entertaining. He looks old. He looks bad. And he would just keep saying, I can't go out like that. I can't go out like that. And going further and further. And it just kept getting worse. Like, saying you can't go out like that when you're 45, it's not necessarily going to get better. And I want it to. I want Brady to go out on a high note where he can maybe win a playoff game and get to a team that, has a little bit more youth, a little more speed, is built better to accommodate his strengths. But if he doesn't feel like he can find that, it's not going to tarnish his legacy because he's already built that.
Not at all.
But don't leave us with that taste in our mouths. Don't do the MJ on the Wizards thing. Like,
No.
just go out. That's what I'm worried about. If he feels like, he's got to be honest with himself. Does he feel like he's lost a step enough of one that he should hang it up? Because if you say you don't want to go out like that, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get better. So we will see. I would like to see him in Vegas, but
I would like to see him in Vegas too. I will say, I know that we're probably going to talk about it a little bit with the firing of Byron, but what I've witnessed from watching the last stretch of games is Brady would come over and they would ask every single time he hit the sideline, what do you want to do here? Byron would come to him and say, what do you want to do here? When you are having to will your team to play, when you're having to be the quarterback, and then you're having to make the play calling the entire game, that's exhausting. How would you not be exhausted throughout a season? He also went through a divorce. Like, he's trying to figure out how to co-parent again with two separate baby mamas at this point. I shouldn't call them baby mamas, ex-wives, whatever. But the point is it's exhausting, especially for a 45-year-old man. What I saw athletically, yeah, I think that he's obviously not prime Brady, but he's not burnt out at all. I think that he looked better than a lot of the starting quarterbacks that we've seen throughout the league.
Sure.
I will hands down start Tom Brady over Derek Carr, over Zach Wilson, over the list goes on. I think that if he can find it in him to go play with Vegas, I think that he can maybe go out one more time. I think that Brady's going to know when it's time to actually hang it up. I do think that he's going to take that serious. I don't think it's going to drag on forever. But at the same time, I don't think that he's going to put himself into that exhausting of a situation.
Yeah, and I think, he had that press conference that people kind of took to heart where he's, thanking the organization and thanking the media and all that. I don't want to overreact to that just because, I think he genuinely doesn't know what he wants to do right now. And so if he does decide to hang it up or if he does decide to go to Vegas, he's not going to have a chance to address that media again or maybe a lot of members of the organization in person. So that's his opportunity to do that. So I don't blame him for the way he came off and the way he worded it. I don't think it's a definitive I'm leaving thing. Because
I think that was a definitive I don't want to come back to the Bucs thing. To be honest with you, I do. I really do.
I don't know that he knows what he wants to do yet, at least as far as Tampa is concerned. Because maybe Tampa makes a bunch of moves. They go get an OC that's interesting, and we'll see what happens. But the Bucs did make the other sort of reactive firing of playoff weekend. We had the Chargers making changes, and then the Bucs fired Byron Leftwich. I think I don't have too much to say about that other than thank God. Get somebody different in there that can, be a little more creative with that offense, because they do have weapons. They have Rashad White. They have one of the better receiver combos in the league, and it was not clicking this year, even though you had to go. And I know a lot of that goes on the O-line, but still, somebody that can work a little better with it. We'll see whoever that may be. Now let's look ahead to this upcoming weekend. Picks for this week. So my bracket's not changing a whole lot. I'm going to simply replace my Chargers over Chiefs pick with Jags over Chiefs. And then I'm going to go with my other picks that are all still holding strong. Bills over Bengals, Eagles over Giants, and 49ers over the Cowboys. Maddie, how are you feeling about this weekend?
I think I feel the same. I can't remember if I went back and forth on the Bucs and the Cowboys over and over again. I can't remember who I finally ended with on the show, but I'm going Philly Giants. I'm picking Philly. Dallas, San Fran, I'm going 49ers. So I have Eagles, 49ers going in next. And then I'm picking Jacksonville because I picked KC last time, but I just don't want them in. I don't.
Yeah, sure.
And Buffalo. So I want to see the Jags and Buffalo go at it.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so those are our picks for this upcoming weekend. Look, a lot of good matchups on tap, but also games that do have the propensity for a blowout. I mean, is anybody going to be shocked if the Chiefs blow out the Jags? Is anybody going to be shocked if the Niners take hold of the Cowboys? Especially Eagles over Giants. I don't think anybody's going to be surprised. The one game that we expect to be super competitive for sure, and that is nice that we got it, after it getting taken from us because of the tragic Damar Hamlin situation. Thankfully, he's doing okay. We are getting Bills, Bengals in the playoffs, which is going to be a super, super fun matchup that I'm looking forward to. The other note I just wanted to say about this upcoming weekend's games, watch out for Boston Scott, because he's a giant killer, and he gets them in the playoffs. Boston Scott, Maddie, have you not seen this? Boston Scott, who is the Eagles' basically third-string running back, this dude scores like every time he faces the Giants, and it's really, really funny. So if you want to take a little bet here, take Boston Scott touchdown, if that's even offered at any book. I have no idea if it will be, but the giant killer is in action in the playoffs, and I'm excited.
I also love the whole Manning cast, all the hoopla about whether we were going to see the Manning brothers in Philly or not. That was fun.
Yeah.
How about the NFC East? We have 3 teams in the NFC East that have made it to the divisional round of the playoffs.
We talked about the NFC East a lot during the season because for a while they had a chance of the whole division getting in. They ended up having 3 teams get in, and they are now all alive and part of the final, what is it, 8 teams? Final 8 teams. Almost 50% of the teams are from the NFC East. That's wild.
That's
insane. Yeah. Great showing for the NFC East this year. Unfortunately, they're going to cannibalize each other a little bit in Eagles-Giants, but that's inevitable when you get down to only 2 games in each conference left. So, or in this round, I mean. So, yeah, look, hey, if we get an NFC East NFC championship game, then this is really a hell of a year for this conference. But for right now, still very, very successful. Commanders are the only one that biffed it a little bit. So, tough look for them. Let's look ahead now. So I mentioned this earlier. CJ Stroud declares for the draft. I just wanted to bring this up because this has some implications for the draft. CJ Stroud, there were some rumors he was going to go back to Ohio State. Now I saw a lot of people like, oh, Colts fans can breathe a sigh of relief. I'm like, because the logic being the Colts may trade up to number 1 or number 2, but I'm like, Texans fans should breathe a sigh of relief. The Texans are the ones sitting at number 2 that if they got leapfrogged by a quarterback needy team at 1 and then they're sitting at 2, like, I guess it's Will Levis time. Like, I don't know. So good. Happy for the Texans that they didn't get completely screwed. Colts, if they move up, good for them. The more quarterbacks at the top of this draft, the better, because CJ Stroud really had nothing. There was no way to improve his stock if he went back to school. He's going to come out of the same draft as Caleb Williams. Why are you going to do that to yourself? You only can hurt yourself at this point. So CJ Stroud coming out ready to, if not save, at least help a team and, come in ready to show something for some of these struggling franchises that can't seem to find a quarterback. And if you're the Texans, you had a decent one ripped away because he's an idiot, but we don't have to dwell on that too much. So CJ Stroud declares for the draft. And the other thing, that we kind of touched on as well. I want to get official predictions. Feels like we're on Sean Payton watch all the time. Maddie, who do you think ends up with Sean Payton officially? So the teams that have interviewed or plan to interview him are the Broncos, the Panthers, the Texans, and the Cardinals. For a while, we thought the Chargers would get him, but the Chargers are apparently sticking with Staley. So where do you think he goes now? Do you think he comes back? Maybe he just doesn't come back.
I don't think that he comes back unless he feels like he can turn an organization. Unless he thinks that he has a good chance of being successful, I think that he stays where he's at. I truly do. If I had to choose out of the few teams just right off the bat, I feel like I want to say Cardinals because Kyler Murray has the most upside. He's an exciting quarterback that you'd want to work with, right? But at the same time, we know that Kyler Murray's hard to work with. The Cardinals have a lot of issues, a lot of holes to fill. That's going to take a lot of effort to turn that team around. So I don't know if he really wants to come out and that be his comeback year.
Yeah.
Everybody keeps saying the Broncos, but I just don't see it. Not with his plan that he wants, the way he wants to come back. To be honest with you, I like your idea of if the Panthers can get a good quarterback in, that would be enticing. And that would be a good place for him to start. But to be honest with you, I don't see him right now going to any of these teams.
Yeah, I'm just like, if the Panthers don't have a quarterback plan, then them interviewing Sean Payton is literally just a Hail Mary. And they're like, yeah, I guess, why not? Because they're not going to entice him to come there with what they have right now. I am going to go with Broncos country. Let's ride. Get Sean Payton over here. I know that Russell Wilson looked like an absolute disaster this year.
We were waiting on it. We were waiting on that.
I know he's looked like an absolute disaster, but again, the rest of this Broncos roster has a lot of talent around it. Here's the main thing. The Broncos owners own Walmart. They have a lot of money. If Sean Payton wants to make a lot of money, come to the Broncos, see if you can figure out Russell Wilson. If not, at least you have on the defensive and offensive side of the ball, like you still have a lot of weapons to work with and you can figure out the quarterback situation later. But for now, see if you can resurrect Russell Wilson. I mean, Sean Payton has experience working with, a short quarterback. I don't know if that matters that much, but it's a fact nonetheless. So I could see him coming to Denver. The fact that they are the odds-on favorite despite having Russell Wilson tells me that maybe it is, in the works. That's going to be my prediction. I hope he ends up in Denver. I hope Shawnee P is, 30 minutes from me in a couple weeks. That'd be pretty cool. And just another thing I wanted to note, because you mentioned Kyler and the Cardinals. So I thought this was funny today. The Cardinals' new GM, Monty Ossenfort, said, quote, "Ego will not be tolerated in this organization." This has nothing to do with Sean Payton, but Kyler Murray, I found that really funny that he said that. So I don't know if he's throwing shade, if it was just a well-placed statement or whatever it was, but I just thought that was interesting. So, yes, Payton to the Broncos. Maddie says Payton indefinitely until something changes with one of these teams is just not going to go anywhere, which is fair. So we will see what happens here over the next month or so. On to our viewer questions to close out the show. This first one. Don't you think you owe Dak an apology? LOL. No, quite frankly, no. We can only operate off of what these quarterbacks do and show us, right? And what Dak Prescott did all season was lead the league in interceptions despite missing 5 games. So I cannot just be here and watch him play like that and be like, no, I think he'll put together the best quarterback performance of the playoffs first round. Yeah. Why would I believe that? So, look, I'm happy that Dak performed this way. To be honest, you will not find a bigger Dak apologist than me, like if you were to go back a year or two. Like I had this dude in my top 5. I found a tweet about like which quarterbacks would you rather have for the next 7 years, like rank your top 5. He was in my top 5. I was a big Dak guy. He just shit the bed for a large portion of this season.
Majority of this season, yeah.
Now he's maybe back to form. So no, I don't think I owe Dak an apology.
I also don't think so, because if you go back and you actually watch the film, the Bucs shit the bed and allow Dak to look as good as he did. Truly, like there was a couple of times where I was like, you're lucky you're playing the Bucs, who just literally didn't want to get up to go play defense. They just didn't. They gave up. No.
We'll see what Dak can do against this 49er defense this weekend.
He wins the Super Bowl, I might give him an apology.
I'll give him a pat on the back, but I'm not apologizing for telling everyone what I watched all season. Yeah. That is ridiculous. No. Last question. And also that question was from David Bird, by the way. David, thank you for the question. Last question. If TB12 retires, do the Bucs trade up to get a new franchise quarterback or make a big trade splash? This question coming from Pink White. If Brady leaves the Bucs, I think the Bucs are just going to have to live in limbo for a year or two. Like, it's a rebuild at that point. And it sucks because you do have receivers who, they're kind of in their prime / back end of their prime, maybe. I don't know. I think they're still in their prime, Evans and Godwin. And then you've got up-and-coming running back with Rachaad White. You still have pieces. But quarterback-wise, it's just not that easy to find one. Like, again, you can go and get yourself a Derek Carr or a Jimmy G and maybe be okay. But there's really no way for this team to immediately acquire what either of us would call a franchise quarterback. That's just not happening in the near future with their draft position and with the free agent crop of quarterbacks, unless they go and get like Lamar or something. So, which is probably not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
So, no, the Bucs will just be kind of in limbo for now.
Yeah.
Always with the sirens.
With Russ is at it again. I always just blame Russ and his bad cooking when your sirens go off.
Probably true.
And honestly, it would kind of be fun to see a second reaction type quarterback end up there. It would be fun to kind of see Trey Lance, just to at least give yourself an option if everything else goes to shit, because that's what happened to the Bucs this year. It's just injuries got him.
Hello, Off the Bench viewers. We had some minor technical difficulties, if you couldn't tell by the fact that we were stopped mid-sentence, but I didn't want to just leave you on that note, so we were basically done talking anyway. Just wanted to let you guys know that we appreciate you listening, and I hope you enjoy this upcoming weekend of football because, man, we are almost done. So for Maddie Kroll, I am Brandon Carney. Thank you for listening to Off the Bench, and we will see you guys next week.